Hi, everybody, and welcome. Another Kalicube Tuesdays, my podcast. Melinda Byerley with the most unusual name in the world. Although it doesn't look unusual, it is unusual, and it appears to be unique. And we can start with a song. A quick hello, and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, Melinda Byerley.
And many more.
Brilliant. I love it when people sing back. Really quickly, before we get into this, and we're going to introduce you in a moment, I just wanted to show this, which is Kalicube Tuesdays from 2020. It started off just trying to kind of fill in that COVID gap where I thought I would go off and start interviewing people live again in a few weeks. It didn't happen. And it was supposed to be 8 episodes. And it's now 35 or 36 episodes. 2020 was amazing. Those are all the people that are there. And I love the design. And we're going to do the same for 2021. And Melinda obviously gets top spot, top left. No problem at all. First episode of 2021. Now, I always start off with the brand SERP. This is Kalicube's tool. This is my tool that I built with my own little hands. And I'm showing my little hands here. Where I actually look at what appears when somebody Google's your brand name, your personal name in your case. Your Twitter boxes, you've obviously got a great Twitter account. LinkedIn, Crunchbase, your own site, some image boxes. It could be more positive. It could have more things on it. That SERP quality means that you could have more rich elements. You could have the knowledge panel, for example, on the right, which is perhaps something you deserve to have. And the control is something to do with how much you actually control in terms of sites that you can influence directly yourself. So not bad, could be better. Really sorry to start with a criticism. But then I looked at you in the knowledge graph, and you are in the knowledge graph. But your knowledge panel has disappeared. So Google's kind of like teetering on the edge of putting you as an entity in its knowledge graph and truly understanding who you are and what you do, but it's not quite there. And so I started, this afternoon, I spent my whole afternoon, what I'm now going to call knowledge graph hopping, which is basically finding things in Google's knowledge graph and then hopping between these different pages. And what I love here is that we've got your name within the podcast episode, which is part of the knowledge graph, which is part of the entity-based content model that we're doing with Wordlift, which is saying, can I push information into Google's understanding, in inverted commas? You know, it's understanding of the world. And the answer is yes, we can quite easily. So we've got that. And if you click on the results that have been excluded, it knows that it's you. And that result is your brand SERP. So it's made that connection. And you're tantalizingly close to having Google fully understand you, and you would become part of its entity algorithm, which is, for me personally, really exciting. I mean, you're trying to look excited, and I know that it's not exciting, but
it is exciting. I love SEO. I love it. But the shoemaker's kids never have any shoes. We probably spend all of our energy on our clients and not enough on ourselves.
Brilliant. Absolutely. I mean, I spend far too much time on entities and do they get in the knowledge graph? So kind of whenever anyone comes on the show, even Rand Fishkin, who introduced us by email, it's imperfect because I don't think people spend enough, in inverted commas, time on it. Mm-hmm. It's going to be very important, but as of now, it's not something you can justify spending an awful lot of time on unless you've got lots of time to waste, like I do.
Well, we all have a bit more time, it seems, these days.
That's a very good point. And I've noticed, I was talking to Joost de Valk from Joost, the plugin. I'm now working with them on their brand SERPs.
Oh, thank goodness.
On how they appear. And they're actually very, very good at that. But he was saying they've done so much this year. And I think a lot of us have actually come through this year of saying, actually, I've ended up doing all the things that I thought I should have done, but hadn't actually done. Has that been like that for you?
It's been surprising, and it's weird and almost uncomfortable to say that it's been a good year, given the suffering of how many people in the world. Yeah. It is, I don't want to call it survivor's guilt, but I think if you have any conscience at all, you realize your good fortune. Good. Yeah. I think a lot of companies have moved spends from travel and entertainment to marketing. I mean, when you've had all this budget set aside, you can't spend it anymore. Marketing is probably the most obvious place to do it. And so many of us in the agency world have been busier than ever. And that has, both positive and negative. We're going like crazy. But on top of that, everybody has children at home or they have personal stress. And so it's been a good year. It's been an intense year, a complicated year. But yeah, we've gotten a lot done this year. We rebranded the company. We used to be called Timeshare CMO. We rebranded in Q4. We signed multiple new clients. We hired people. So it's been
And
good.
you're now called Fiddlehead,
Mm-hmm.
which is a brilliant name. I love the name. I'm a double bass player, as we're about to see. So Fiddlehead, violin. I'm obviously kind of expanding on things and making it all fit into me, which is what we do as human beings anyway. And we're going to start talking about marketing. And this was me 25 years ago. And this was my start in marketing. I joined a band, and you can see me there at the bottom playing a double bass, me at the top.
You had less hair than you do now.
Very good point. And for people listening to the podcast, there is a photo of me with no hair on the screen, and I have no hair today. But what I found really interesting, I was thinking about how can I introduce the idea of traditional marketing, which is what you're going to be talking to us about. And it's actually that I joined this band, and my entire marketing strategy was to get a list of bars who had bands in France and ring them up one by one and just keep bullying them and convincing them until they took us on, and then build a reputation by being a great band. We were actually good at what we did. We got people involved. We played music that made people have a good party. And so the marketing strategy, which I would suggest is timeless, is being very good at what you do and really pushing yourself on other people, even if they don't necessarily know that they need you. But I think you have to have a great product for that to work, because if you don't, you just end up being a bully.
Yeah, I mean, I often say to potential clients even that if you don't have a great product, nothing I can do can save you.
Brilliant.
We're great marketers. We really know what we're doing. But if your product doesn't meet the market's needs, we can't help you. Now, we can help you improve the product. There's lots of ways we can talk about it. But if you're coming because sales aren't great, chances are it's probably not marketing. Chances are there's a bigger problem at stake. Another saying I like to say is people don't switch CMOs when things are going well.
Right. Okay. Wonderful stuff. So in fact, marketing is partly changing the product to fit the market better, because a lot of business owners create the product that they want rather than the product that their audience wants. Is that the fundamental problem of marketing?
Well, I think it's not very popular to say in technology circles, but the core principles of marketing are the 4 Ps: product, price, placement, and promotion. And way too often marketing is conflated with promotion. It's shouting. It's how much money do we spend on ads? But if you think back to the great brand companies like Procter & Gamble, for example, Nestle, marketers are deeply involved with the product. They are figuring out what the market needs. They are figuring out how to price it. They're figuring out what channels to put it in. I have an MBA, so I've been trained in sort of the classic sort of form of business marketing, and it's still appropriate. Now, the fundamentals haven't changed. We still need to understand the market. We still need to figure out where and how to reach them and to build messaging that resonates with them. And that hasn't changed from the days of radio and sandwich boards.
Brilliant, which is like before I was even born, which makes me feel much better about myself.
Some people have told me, right?
but there was a big kind of chunk in the middle. I mean, I have a career in being a blue dog in a cartoon on a website, and I thought SEO was all I need. And there's this big hole for me between 2000 and literally last year, where everyone, there was a tendency to think just pleasing Google is enough to make my brand and my business work online. And you've always known that was wrong, and I was a fool.
You're not a fool. I mean,
thank you.
You're not a fool. I mean, you're not a fool. I mean, I've sat in Silicon Valley for 20 years, and I've had the ability to see across a bunch of different companies, and experience is what you get when you didn't get what you wanted. So you have to, I've watched companies at all sizes try different tactics. So I didn't spring fully formed into this opinion. It evolved over watching and trying and growing. And there was a time when it was enough. That's the point. There was a time when if you owned Google, you won because there was nobody else competing with you. And so in many ways, it was sort of like buying all of the ad space in a magazine. You could suck all the oxygen away from everybody. But Google is not static. So it's not that you were wrong, it's that things have changed.
Do you think, well, sorry, I mean, because from my point of view with the blue dog and the yellow koala, in fact, owning Google in a kind of metaphorical sense is that we were number one because I could count words, I could build links, and that was all that mattered. And we ended up with 5 million visits a month for a site for kids, which is phenomenal, and 1 billion page views in a year in 2007. And I don't think that would work anymore. I don't think I would get anywhere near that anymore. Is that because Google has changed or because Google isn't so dominant anymore?
No, it's because Google has changed. I worked at eBay when we were Google's largest customer. So we were the single largest buyer of ads. And in fact, we were the first sort of people to be trained in SEO. Google came in and trained us. How do you optimize pages on eBay for success in Google? So very much like what you talked about, this is back in 2003. So very much about like what's the word count on the page and how many links do you have, and are you using the meta tag, and how, all of that stuff. But the thing is, if you make it understandable in many ways, then it can be gamed. And then you had all of the black hat and all of, people could start gaming it. So Google had to get smarter in order to make the results work. And now, of course, we're, fast forward catapult into the AI world, where I don't think even Google understands how the algorithm works anymore. Gray's sort of how the bots work or how the bots are built cartoon is just so brilliant at this, and explaining very clearly that by the time you are this good at it, even the people who make the bots don't even understand how the algorithm works. And so all we can do is try to figure out, what we can do to influence it. And I think it starts with, again, going back to first principles, understanding your customer and what they're looking for, and using the tools that we are given, and they have been, kneecapped. I don't know if that word translates, but they've been hobbled over the years. Google's given us less and less information under the guise of privacy, but the more information we actually have about what people are searching on, the better we can create content that suits them. So it's all about, figuring out what are people looking for and trying to be there at the moment they're looking for it. You can influence what they look for. I'm almost finished. You can influence what they look for. That's top of funnel. That's brand marketing. That's, measuring searches is a very interesting way to measure PR and top of funnel efforts. But in the end, if you don't deliver what they're looking for, they're going to leave and Google's going to penalize you. Right.
Yeah. Wonderful stuff. And what I find interesting is that Google is saying more and more, create your content for your users. And people are saying, well, they're not actually saying anything, but in fact they are. They're saying just be a good marketer. And there was this whole, and I think we can probably agree, from let's say 1998 when I started at least, until maybe a couple of years ago, you could just fill that gap with Google SEO and win the game with links and word counting. And those days are now over, which is why it's so interesting to say. I mean, I never learned proper marketing, and you obviously did. What are these timeless marketing strategies that still work that I've probably missed out on?
You didn't miss out on them. That's the brilliant part of it. I mean, I think that, I was just tweeting about this the other day, that whenever you see someone say that the timeless principles of marketing and business are dead, you have to question that, because there's a reason why they're timeless. Can you repeat it? Is it repeatable? Something may work for one company, but not for another. And what we like to say is that, who says this really well is Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn. And he says, all startup marketing plans are sui generis. They are in a class of their own. They are unique. Your company is unique. How you measure is unique. Who your customers are is unique. So there's no playbook that anybody can run on you to make you number one or to make you win. There's no shortcut. There is only hard work and discipline. So it's in many ways, the timeless lesson here is classic. Who is your customer? Really deeply, who is your customer? Not, oh, we market to millennials. Right. A millennial can be a mother of two living in Houston. He can be a young guy working in a tech company. He can be a farm worker in Omaha. I mean, those people are all millennials. So
Very true, yeah.
I like the way Seth Godin talks about it in his book, This is Marketing. I tell people it's really the one of the best books I've read in the last 10 years.
Oh, right. I was going to say, you've read the book, so you can
Yes.
now tell me what I need to know from the book, then I don't have to read it.
Know about that book is what they care, is to really deeply understand what your customer cares about. What are they afraid of? What motivates them? What do they love? What do they hate? Why do they use your product? Why don't they use your product? Why do people who don't use your product don't use it? I'll give you an example. One of our customers, DVD Netflix. So yes, kids. Netflix was a company before streaming, and they ship DVDs to people's houses. That business still exists. They are still our client. And after research, they did extensive research into Redbox customers. Redbox is it's like a kiosk that goes into stores, like a grocery store or a pharmacy, a pharmacist, a chemist, and you can go in and get the disc and take it home that night.
Okay. And
they're a competitor. They're still around, by the way.
Really?
America's a big physically distanced country, right? So there's need for these types of things, especially, in more remote areas. So point being that when DVD Netflix interviewed Redbox customers, one of the things they learned was that people watch movies 2 or 3 at a time. And they also they were shocked to find out that people would be willing to wait for 2 days. Most people thought if you went to DVD, you'd have to wait a week.
Right.
It turns out that like more than 95% of discs are delivered within 2 days. So when they change the messaging on the website to say, you will get your disc delivered in as little as 2 days, conversion rate goes through the roof. So it's really understanding, what do they care about? Why? Really, why are they using or not using your service? And then simply do you see how common sense this is? This doesn't require an advanced degree. It doesn't require fancy training. It's listening to people.
Well, it's asking them what they're looking for and having empathy for what it is they're trying to achieve. And I think you said earlier on what they're afraid of, which I kind of find a bit creepy, maybe. I mean, looking at what people are afraid of and then serving that feels to me a bit kind of, I don't know.
I mean, marketing is benign propaganda. It truly is. We have to be honest about it. It's a form of propaganda. We're influencing people. We have to. That's our job. We have to get them to buy the product. I'm sorry, but it is. You had to get those club owners.
I was going to say exactly that. I just rang them up and kept talking to them until they said, we'll have him just to shut him up.
Yeah. You're influencing behavior one way or another. So let's be honest and acknowledge that. And so if you go back to first principles, Freud says fear and greed. What motivates people is fear and greed. Now, fear doesn't necessarily mean like, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. That feels a little, what's the word? Just taking advantage of somebody.
Yeah.
That feels wrong. Feels manipulative.
That's what I was feeling wrong about.
But fear of a DVD, like I want to watch it this Friday. You're telling me that if I pick it out Monday, it will be here by Friday. Great. Now I'm in. Like another word could be an objection. In sort of classic sales terminology, what's an objection?
Okay, right, brilliant. So we've got the 4 Ps. I mean, hang on, you're going to be able to tell them because I can't. There's product,
price, placement, and promotion.
Right, brilliant. I'm rubbish at this, by the way. I really should ask my clients what they want. So in terms of timelessness, I mean, I kind of went through this. I was dealing with kids' content, and I thought because the content is good enough, people will end up understanding, and I don't actually need to do any marketing. Anybody listening? Melinda just had this kind of big, bright-eyed thing. I think I just said something either very stupid or very intelligent. It's
so common. The more we know about a subject, the more we assume others know.
Yep.
So another client of ours who I can't share the name of, they have a technical product, and they're experts in their field, and the content written for experts in their field goes crazy. But they want to acquire new customers, and those new customers need to understand. They need to have content written for beginners. What is X is a very common thing, or how does X work, or why do I buy X? Very simple queries. And product people and in those companies often just don't want to, why would I write that? But that's what, if you look at the queries, that's what people are searching for.
Yeah, I was talking about that earlier on. I mean, because my obsession is brand SERPs and knowledge panels. I was talking to a colleague who's had problem with his knowledge panel over the last few years. and he managed to get one. And he, long story short, I've just looked at everything that he's done, and it's messy. And it isn't going to stick. And I know it's not going to stick. And I kind of want to say, but this is really obvious. And in fact, it isn't obvious. It's only obvious because I've been looking at it for 7 years.
Right. And it's not, and if you are an expert in widgets, that's what you're an expert in. You're not an expert in how to talk about widgets on the internet via search engine optimization. That's a different thing. That's a different skill set. So I think there was a time when all of us in marketing, especially digital, were generalists. You were digital or you were brand. Yeah. And now within digital, you're social, your SEO, your SEM, your influencer, your content. But back to your point, the phrase we like to use is SEO informed content marketing. You're still doing content marketing. It's still aligned with your brand strategy. It's still aligned with your customer needs. Having personas and use cases and all that's important. But then that work should be informed by SEO research. In particular, right. Hub and spoke model, which is the way that we work right now, which is the way that we believe, it's our understanding that this is how Google's models work in terms of the amount of content and the type of content that are built around a hub with supporting keywords. But the idea is not that you get that keyword and write it 25 right. times. This is really important when we work with companies who are media companies. The last thing, right, that an editor, the editorial wants to hear is to be told what to write about. And they're terrified of SEO. So when you talk to them, you can say, it's not that you write about X, it's that when you write about X, know that the terms people are actually searching on are this one and this one and this one. Use those in the writing.
Yeah, I was talking on the podcast a year and a bit ago to Louisa Fram from, I think it was the Los Angeles Times, and she was saying that she was coming in and saying to them, you're writing about the right topics, but you're trying to be too, in inverted commas, clever. Mm-hmm. And you're over expressing things, and you're not using the terms that our audience is using, which means that we're not getting found. And she was saying that her best weapon was to say, you won't get read.
Right.
If you don't, which is basically appealing to people's egos. It's saying, if you want to be read, you need to use the terms that your clients are using or your audience is using.
And so in a newspaper's case, you want to be read by everyone. Yeah. But if you're selling a very technical product to engineers, the question is read by whom?
A very good point. And
so again, back to the client example that I gave you, there are people who are already their clients, love their content. But if you want new clients, it's a very complicated field and it needs explaining. And they need to be found at the sort of consideration phase of buying. So right. Thinking about not just, okay, what are the words people are using, but when are they using them? Are we trying to retain? Is it top of funnel? Where? And so the words that we use to look for something are different in the early stages of researching something than they are. So another example we like to use is if you look for red shoes, you can rank for that. And they may or may not buy from you. But when you start to rank for phrases like size 8 Prada women's red pumps, that person has their credit card out and ready to buy.
Right, yeah.
And it's important to understand when you're writing a piece of content and you're building out your strategy, how do those two things fit together? Who are we writing for?
I mean, and in terms of Google, what I've noticed with my clients is you start ranking for the size 8 foot pump, red, whatever it was you said, I can't remember exactly, high heels. If you rank for enough of those and you satisfy enough of Google's clients, and we tend to forget they're Google's audience, Google's users, Google's clients, and our audience, and we're asking Google to recommend us, or our solution to their own users, even if they are potentially our audience. Once you start ranking for these terms, Google gets more and more confident that you can serve its clients, and you will then end up ranking for those short head queries.
That's the bot. You're training the bot, essentially, from the bottom up. You're training the bot. And by the way, this is true in the App Store. Back in the days, people were starting to build apps. The best advice we could give them was build apps that sell iPhones. It's different now that the iPhone is so dominant. But in those early days, it was when you made an app that Apple thought was incredible and sold iPhones that could only be made on an iPhone, they would give you placement in the store. And I think it's worth thinking about that. How does the work you do on Facebook keep people on Facebook?
Right, I had this kind of partially this discussion with Rand, and it's empathy for the beast, and it's kind of creepy to say you have to have empathy
I
for
can hear
Google and
Rand saying
Facebook.
it.
No, I said it.
Oh, you said it. Yeah, it's empathy for the beast. Yeah, I love
He
it.
smiled and nodded kindly. But the idea of having
Empathy.
empathy for Google or Facebook or Apple seems terribly contradictory. But in fact, empathy doesn't mean I appreciate them necessarily. It's that I understand what their needs are.
Yeah, I mean, it's practical. It's and again, back to sort of another timeless strategy, since that's the topic, and I'm sure Rand would agree. It's build your house on your own land. So
Right.
have your own website. Keep building out your, if you're a smaller if you're a company, it's a little bit different. But if you're a smaller business, have your own website, have your own email list in particular. Build your own relationships with your customers. Build your house on your own land. Don't build presences. You can have presences, but they should be satellites. The core should always be about bringing people back to your website and your mailing list.
Right. And then it's all about brand. I mean, this is my current kind of, well, because I deal with brand SERPs, and I'm basically saying there are so many people searching your brand name. They are clients, they are prospects, they are journalists, they are potential hires. And those are the people you really need to look after. And John Mueller was saying at SMX at the end of last year, you really should be looking for pull search terms. And pull search terms in his analysis is brand terms.
Mm-hmm. It's complicated. Like I often joke that the MBA is actually where they teach you to say it depends to everything.
Right.
Like it depends is the answer. But so I worked on SEO back at PayPal in 2003. Yeah, because it was eBay in 2002. It was PayPal 2005. Sorry, it's been many years.
Oh, sorry. eBay bought PayPal rather than the other way around.
I was one of the first eBay people to go to PayPal after the acquisition.
Right. Okay.
So I go into PayPal, and one of the first problems that was put in front, and I was a pup. I mean, I was just a baby. And one of the first problems was the website paypalsucks.com, which was ranking, almost outranking PayPal. And in fact, PayPal was ranking #1 for the phrase learn more at the time because all the hyperlinks on the site were for learn more. So, which nobody's searching on. So it was an interesting problem. And we had, frankly, we had a great agency. These are problems that are very hard to solve internally. And SEO is on the cutting edge of this stuff because it really is algorithmic changes. And it's very unlikely now that people inside of most companies are going to have the knowledge about what Google's up to own SEO. So I had a great agency that worked with me at the time, but so it's not just the brand, but what about the brand? Because when you think about it, to Google's eyes, PayPal Sucks is a pretty relevant website.
True.
It's very relevant.
Yeah, what I would tend to say about a brand SERP is it's all about kind of what Google thinks is valuable and relevant to its users concerning that brand. And if PayPal truly does suck, PayPal Sucks would be a good result because it does give a relevant view of what PayPal is or isn't.
The problem is now I'm just speaking from my own personal experience and belief. So this is just speculation. I believe that the rise of Google has done something with its algorithm with the rise of social that has weighted content that is shared widely on social media.
Right.
So
can I ask you to put a date on that?
A date?
Yeah.
On when I think that happened?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, kind of.
I felt it personally. I said some things on Twitter that offended greatly a number of right-wing websites, and I was personally attacked. My face was on Fox News. I was swarmed by multiple right-wing websites, small sites, not big ones. The big ones got me too. I was on Daily Caller. I mean, you haven't lived till you've been through this. That's probably a whole other podcast. The point of all of this is that some of that detritus, some of that stuff is still there when you search for my brand. I was able to have most of it removed by creating new content, by doing the things you normally do, by also saying to Google, what the hell? Why are you pushing these small sites up ahead of my interviews in the Washington Post? My interviews in the New York Times are ranking below this. This isn't the Daily Caller. This is some crappy right-wing, low-grade site that's fresher and newer. But because of all of the bot activity on social media, it was shared a lot. In particular, I think Discus is something that Google seems to appear to weight very heavily.
Right. Okay.
And so through multiple sort of, report this search, I just kept logging in and reporting, and I kept showing them, why are you pushing this site above the Washington Post, above the New York Times? Over time, those sites dropped. And I don't know if it was time. I don't know if it was my complaining. I don't know if it was political pressure from the world on, what they're doing with right-wing news websites. And regardless of your political beliefs, it is a instructive example of the algorithm and what's going on. So I think it was happening sort of naturally as Facebook was rising. They were using social signals as a way to drive sort of popularity.
Right. There's a really interesting kind of, Zinlu Nadong, who was at Google and is now at Amazon, started this whole idea of trust-based knowledge, which is what the knowledge graph is based on. And she was using the example of popularity versus trustworthiness.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
And you would be talking about popularity rather than trustworthiness. And it's a major problem for all of these machines, all of these platforms, whatever they want to do, whatever they're trying to do. The pure force of popularity is terribly difficult. Yeah, overwhelming. It's difficult for a machine to resist. And you were saying earlier on, they don't actually know what the machines are doing. They're setting it goals. And the machine is trying to achieve those goals. It's trying to match the metrics that it's being asked to match.
To YouTube and the videos, if you say optimize for watch time, let's go back to human psychology. We watch things that that charge us up, whether it's and we hate to say it, but we are human beings. We are animals, and the things that charge us up are things like greed and anger and lust and things that are high emotion. Are regardless of what the 7 deadly sins, right? They are going to drive our watching up. Fear. So a lot of those videos right around anti-vaccination and COVID hoaxing and 9/11 hoaxing and all of the conspiracies, QAnon, all that stuff ties into people's psychology. About 25% of the population, as it turns out, has an enlarged amygdala in their brain.
I don't know what that is, sorry.
It's a part of your brain, and I'm about to exhaust my knowledge of brain science, but the amygdala has to do with fear regulation. And when you have when your amygdala is slightly enlarged, you are more sensitive to messages of fear.
Right.
And quite interestingly, it's about 25% of the population that voted for Donald Trump. So this is me, making my own conspiracy theory, but there's something we have to understand the brain. Back to benign propaganda. Marketing is about people's brains. And the more we understand about our own brains and the brains of the people that we're trying to influence, I try to use my powers for good. I tell people, I believe Rand is one of those people who uses his powers for good. Some people do not. And understanding that is important. We have to understand that beast. You called it empathy for the beast, but I think it's just understanding. You got to know your adversary, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. If you watch The Godfather, this is part of, if we're good marketers, it's our responsibility to understand these tools so that we can advise our clients on when to use them, when not to use them, and how to use them successfully.
So sorry, now we can come back into marketing again. You were talking about personas and really understanding who it is you're addressing, who your audience truly is, rather than just the millennials idea, which I really like because it does give you those 3 different examples you gave of very different millennials.
Right. And there are people in Paris that are millennials too, right? And people in Turkmenistan and Australia,
100%. Yeah, sorry. And so you need to understand both your users, but also the platforms you're dealing with.
Correct.
Isn't that something that isn't timeless and traditional, i.e. something that didn't exist 25 years ago?
That is true. And this is where I love to work with the people that are really young and really fresh at coming into this, because they understand Snapchat, right? And they understand TikTok in a way that I won't yet. Like, I'm a Twitter person. I do think that social media has a lot to do with how your brain works. I just don't like Instagram. I'm not as visually stimulated as I am by Twitter, by the fast-moving talking, the wittiness, the sort of repartee on Twitter. I live for. I don't get that from Instagram.
Right.
And so, what are the types of people that if you're a consumer brand, if you're Peloton, you have to be on Twitter or on Instagram. That's what it's all about. But they're not on Twitter. And I want to say to them, why? Because there's a lot of us on Twitter who are on Peloton, and it's really hard to find any interaction with the instructors. I don't get anywhere near the interaction from them that I crave, that they give people that are on Instagram. There's a whole audience that they're missing. that they're not even talking to, because their presence on Twitter is it's formulaic. It's the basics.
But you think they're making a mistake, that they're missing a trick by not being there? Or do you think some brand...
a unicorn? I mean,
can a brand just say, I can completely put Instagram to one side and forget about it because that's not where my target audience is?
Especially the younger you are and the faster you're growing, you have to. In fact, the best advice we give to high growth, high velocity companies is do fewer, bigger things. So in that sense, there's nothing wrong with doing Instagram only. The question is, if you want to grow, where will you grow from? What's next?
Right. Okay.
The street is never satisfied. So where is the next level of growth coming from? So again, it depends. Yes, I think a brand can and should set it aside. For example, does Peloton need to be on LinkedIn? Maybe not so much right now. They're doing it for recruiting. This is mostly an HR presence. But probably not for them. And Facebook is probably not for some brands, and it is right for others. It just depends on, again, back to when companies approach us, potential clients, the first thing we want to know is, how well do you know your customer? How well do you know yourself? Because if you don't know what your message is and who your customers are, we cannot be successful for you. We can guide you through a process of getting to there. But if you're not already there, nothing we will do will satisfy you, because you won't know whether it's good or not.
But that for me then begs the question, and we've started to wrap it up here, is social media is phenomenally more important than it ever has been before. And secondly, it's a really great way to get to know your audience. You reach out and you see what does work and what doesn't work, and which platforms are going to work and which aren't. And that's a great way then to start thinking, okay, this is where I need to go with my marketing strategy in general and the packaging I do. I like to say we package our content for Google rather than we create it for Google.
That's a great idea. Like, how do you wrap it? You have it. Well, and again, even in business to business, you have a piece, the whole idea of a pyramid-based content strategy where you have a core asset like a white paper, but then you break it apart and you repackage it. Maybe you have pictures from it on Instagram, and you have quotes from it on Twitter with the thing. And then maybe you do some interviews about it for a podcast, and so on, blog posts and so on. So same idea. You have a core base of content, and then you package it for the channels. I think of social media as a distribution channel, not as a content channel. It's like a broadcast network.
Brilliant. Okay. Absolutely wonderful. I think we can end it there. I think that was absolutely delightful and wonderful. And I'm going to listen to this again and take all these ideas and apply them to my own business. Thank you very much, Melinda. I'm just going to quickly say that next week we've got Eric Schwartzman, How to Get Featured on Top Websites, which I'm quite keen to listen to as well. Back to Melinda. That was absolutely brilliant. And you get the outro song. A quick goodbye to end the show. Thank you, Melinda.
That was beautiful. And I can't wait to watch this and ask my team about Knowledge Graph and how I can actually cross the chasm in Google's.
I'm telling you, you're this far away. I can see it. I can feel it in my old bones.
My old bones sympathize.